A slave and her master could never be together, but the alpha vampire chose her over his throne. The silver blade pressed against her throat had not been wielded by an enemy. It was her master's hand that trembled with murderous intent as the council chamber erupted in chaos, and she realized with absolute clarity that loving him had never been her greatest sin. It was surviving him that would damn them both. Wait, before the next revelation happens. If this mystery has already captivated you, let us know where you're following this story from. To make sure you don't miss any unexpected alliances or awakened powers, subscribe and join our circle. The game is about to change. Now, back to the scene. The marble floor beneath Ilara's knees was cold enough to seep through the thin fabric of her servant's dress. Blood dripped from a gash on her temple, each crimson drop echoing in the sudden silence that had fallen over the grand council of the Eternal Court. 12 ancient vampires sat in judgment, their eyes gleaming like predators who had scented weakness. And at the center of it all stood Lucien Darkmoor, Alpha of the Northern Coven, his face a mask of stone as he held the ceremonial blade to her throat. You would choose death over exile? His voice carried across the vaulted chamber, cold and imperious. It was the voice he used to command armies, to sentence traitors, to remind the world why his bloodline had ruled for 3,000 years. It was not the voice he had used 3 nights ago when he had whispered her name in the darkness of his private chambers, when his lips had traced the curve of her jaw, when he had looked at her as if she were the only source of light in his immortal existence. Ilara met his gaze, those eyes that burned like molten gold in the torchlight. She had memorized every facet of his face over the 5 years she had served in her household, the sharp angle of his jaw. The aristocratic nose that spoke of ancient lineage, the mouth that could curl into cruelty or soften into something that made her heart forget its rhythm. "I choose truth," she said quietly. The blade pressed harder. A thin line of blood appeared beneath the silver edge. "Then speak it, human." The words were a command, but she heard the tremor beneath them, the desperation he could not afford to show before the council. "Tell them what you told me. Confess your crime before these witnesses." Lady Morgana, eldest of the council and matriarch of the Eastern Covens, leaned forward with predatory interest. Her snow-white hair cascaded over shoulders draped in crimson silk, and her smile revealed fangs that had tasted the blood of empires. "Yes, little mouse, confess. Did you or did you not poison the Alpha's intended bride?" The question hung in the air like an executioner's axe. Ilara had not poisoned anyone, but the truth was far more dangerous than any lie. 3 days earlier, she had been dusting the shelves in Lucien's private library when Lady Seraphina Nightshade had swept in, trailing expensive perfume and centuries of aristocratic entitlement. Lucien's betrothed had barely glanced at Ilara. Humans were furniture to creatures like Seraphina, barely worth acknowledging except to bark orders. "The engagement ball is in 2 weeks," Seraphina had purred, running one perfectly manicured nail along Lucien's desk. "Of course." Lucien's voice had been polite, distant, the voice of a man fulfilling an obligation. Ilara had kept her head down, continuing her work. She had no right to the jealousy that burned in her chest. She was a slave, purchased at auction 5 years ago to pay her father's debts, her life measured in the terms of servitude outlined in a contract signed in blood. Lucien had chosen her from among 50 other humans because she could read, because she had spirit in her eyes, because... You may go." Lucien had spoken directly to her, and the unexpected attention had sent a jolt through her system. Their eyes had met, held. Something passed between them that made Serafina's gaze sharpen with suspicion. That should have been the end of it. Elara should have curtsied and left. She should have remembered her place. Instead, Lucien had found her later that night in the servants' quarters. He had stood in the doorway of her tiny room, a creature of darkness and power, looking impossibly out of place among the simple furnishings. The moonlight through her window had cast silver highlights in his black hair. "I should not be here," he had said. "Then leave," she had replied, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. He had closed the distance between them in 3 strides. "Do you understand what you are asking of me? I ask nothing. I am a slave, my lord. I have no right to ask anything of you." Exactly. His hand had cupped her face with a gentleness that contradicted everything she knew about vampires. "You have no power, no position, no value in the eyes of my world. And yet you are the only person in 3 centuries who has looked at me and seen something other than a title, a weapon, a strategic alliance." She had known then that they were both damned, that this path led only to destruction. But when he had kissed her, the world had narrowed to the point of contact between them. His cool lips, her racing heart, the impossible mathematics of a love that violated every law of their society. They had stolen moments over the following weeks, secret meetings in forgotten corners of his vast estate, conversations that stretched until dawn forced them apart. She had learned that beneath the ruthless Alpha was a man tired of immortality, weary of the endless political games, desperate for something real in a world of masks and machinations. And he had discovered that she was not simply a human slave content with her lot. She had been a scholar's daughter once, before her father's gambling debts had destroyed their family. She had read philosophy and poetry. She dreamed of a world where the arbitrary divisions between human and vampire could dissolve. It was beautiful. It was impossible. It was doomed. On the night before Serafina's arrival for the pre-wedding festivities, Lucien had come to Elara's room one final time. "I have to marry her," he had said, the words raw with pain. "The alliance between northern and eastern covens depends on this union. Without it, we fracture. Without unity, the vampire hunters will exploit our divisions and slaughter thousands of our kind." I know. Elara had touched his face, memorizing the angles and planes of it. "I have always known. I will keep you in my household. You will be safe, provided for." "As your mistress?" The bitterness in her voice had surprised even her. "Hidden away like a shameful secret while you parade your perfect vampire bride before the courts?" His jaw had tightened. "There is no alternative. The laws. The laws are written by those in power to maintain their power. You could change them if you truly wanted to. I am one vampire, Elara. Even an alpha must answer to the council. Then I will not stay to watch you marry her." The words had escaped before she could stop them. "My contract expires in 3 months. I will not renew it." The silence that followed had been devastating. "You would leave me?" Something wild and dangerous had flickered in his eyes. "I would save us both from becoming something twisted. I love you too much to be your hidden shame." He had left without another word. The next morning, Lady Serafina had fallen violently ill. Convulsions, fever, symptoms that suggested silver poisoning, a rare but deadly toxin to vampires. The wedding plans had been thrown into chaos. The council had demanded an investigation. And somehow, a vial of silver powder had been discovered hidden in Elara's room. She had been dragged before the council within hours. Lucian had been forced to conduct the interrogation himself, bound by the laws of his position to execute any human who raised a hand against vampire nobility. The penalty was death by silver blade, administered by the hand of the Alpha himself. Now, in the council chamber, with that blade pressed to her throat and 12 immortal predators waiting for her confession, Ilara made her choice. "I did not poison Lady Seraphina," she said clearly. Murmurs rippled through the council. "The evidence suggests otherwise," Lady Morgana said smoothly. "The silver powder was found in your quarters. You had means and opportunity. And we have testimony from multiple servants that you have been seen entering the Alpha's private chambers at inappropriate hours. Were you attempting to eliminate your rival?" The words were a trap, carefully baited. Ilara saw the calculation in Morgana's ancient eyes. This had never been about Seraphina's poisoning. This was about breaking Lucian's authority, about creating a scandal that would force him to abdicate in shame. The Eastern Coven wanted the Northern Territories. They wanted to dissolve the treaties that Lucian had spent decades negotiating. And they had found the perfect weapon in a human slave foolish enough to love her master. Ilara looked at Lucian, saw the agony beneath his mask of control, understood with terrible clarity what she had to do. "I will tell you the truth," she said quietly, "but not here, not before this audience." "You will speak now or die now," Morgana snapped. "Those are your only choices." "Then I choose a third option." Ilara's voice grew stronger. "By the ancient laws of your kind, I invoke the right of trial by combat. I challenge my accuser to face me in the arena and let fate decide the truth." The chamber exploded with shocked voices. Humans did not invoke the right of trial. It was a death sentence against vampire opponents. It was suicide. But it was also legally binding. If Ilara could name her true accuser, not Seraphina, but the puppet master behind the poisoning, the council would be forced to allow the combat or admit that the entire proceeding was a sham. Lucian's hand tightened on the knife. "Ilara, no!" "I name Lady Morgana as my accuser," Ilara said, her voice ringing across the chamber. "It was she who planted the silver in my room. She who poisoned Lady Seraphina to create this scandal. She who seeks to destroy the Alpha and claim the Northern Territories for the Eastern Coven." The silence that followed was absolute. Morgana rose slowly from her seat, her face a mask of aristocratic fury. "You dare!" "I dare invoke the ancient laws that even you cannot break," Ilara interrupted. "Unless you wish to admit before this council that you have been maneuvering against the Alpha in violation of the Treaty of Eternal Night." She was gambling everything on a single desperate ploy. Lucian had told her about Morgana's ambitions during one of their stolen conversations, about the Eastern Coven's resentment of Northern power, about the fragile web of alliances that kept the vampire world from descending into civil war. If she was right, Morgana would be forced to accept the challenge or reveal her guilt. If she was wrong, she had just sentenced herself to an even more brutal death. Morgana's eyes narrowed to slits of venomous calculation. Then, slowly, deliberately, she smiled. "Very well. I accept your challenge, little mouse. Tomorrow at dusk, in the arena of judgment, the council will bear witness as I tear you apart for your insolence." The blade at Ilara's throat disappeared. Lucian stepped back, his face unreadable as he addressed the council. "The challenge has been issued and accepted. The combat will proceed according to ancient law. This session is adjourned." As the council members filed out, their voices a buzz of speculation and scandal, Lucian finally allowed his mask to crack. He looked at Ilara with an expression of raw anguish. "What have you done?" "I have given you time to find the truth," she said quietly. 24 hours to prove that Morgana orchestrated this entire conspiracy. That is more time than you had when you were holding that blade to my throat. You will die tomorrow. No human has ever survived trial by combat against a vampire of Morgana's age. Then I will die having saved you from the trap she set. Your reputation will remain intact. The Northern Coven will not fall. I do not want your sacrifice." The words came out as a roar that made the remaining servants shrink back in fear. "I want you alive. I want—" He stopped himself, centuries of control reasserting themselves. When he spoke again, his voice was cold, distant, the voice of the Alpha. "You will be confined to the holding cells until tomorrow's combat. Guards, escort the prisoner." 2 vampire guards materialized at Ilara's sides, their grips iron on her arms. As they dragged her toward the chamber doors, she looked back at Lucian one final time. His eyes met hers across the distance, and in that moment she saw everything he could not say. The love that violated every law of their world, the desperation of a man caught between duty and desire, the promise of a creature who had lived for 3,000 years and would move heaven and earth to save the one person who made existence bearable. The guards hauled her away before she could respond. The holding cells beneath the council hall were exactly what one might expect of a vampire prison. Stone walls slick with centuries of moisture, iron bars that smelled of rust and old blood, and a darkness so complete that human eyes could barely distinguish shadow from solid matter. Ilara sat on the narrow bench that served as bed and furniture, her arms wrapped around herself as she tried not to think about tomorrow, about what it would feel like to face Morgana in the arena, about the inevitability of her death. She had no regrets about invoking the trial. It was the only move that could buy Lucian the time he needed. But she wished she had kissed him one more time, told him that loving him had been worth every consequence. Footsteps echoed in the corridor outside her cell. Too heavy to be a human guard, too quick to be a casual patrol. Lucian materialized from the shadows, his face stark in the dim torchlight. He moved with the predatory grace that marked his kind, but there was something fragile in the set of his shoulders, something almost human. "I dismissed the guards," he said quietly. "We have 10 minutes before they return. You should not be here. If the council discovers—" "Let them." He crossed to the bars, his hands wrapping around the iron with enough force to leave dents. "Tell me you did not actually invoke trial by combat. Tell me this is some elaborate strategy I am too furious to see." "It is a strategy. It gives you time to investigate, to find proof of Morgana's conspiracy. And when I fail, when tomorrow comes and you must face her in the arena." Ilara rose and walked to the bars, close enough to feel the cold that radiated from his undead flesh. "Then I will die knowing that I protected the man I love. That is not such a terrible ending." His eyes blazed with gold fire. "It is unacceptable. I will not allow it. You have no choice. The challenge has been issued and accepted. By your own laws, the combat must proceed. Then I will change the laws. I will dissolve the council. I will burn this entire system to the ground before I let you die for me. And plunge the vampire world into chaos? Thousands would die in the civil war that followed. You know this, Lucian." You have always known that duty comes before desire. Damn duty. His voice was ragged. 3,000 years I have lived by that principle. 3,000 years of sacrificing my own wishes for the greater good. But this, losing you, this is the one sacrifice I cannot make. She reached through the bars and touched his face. His skin was cool beneath her palm, but she could feel the tremor of emotion running through him. Then find proof of Morgana's conspiracy. Save yourself and the Northern Coven. That is what I need from you. He caught her hand, pressing it against his cheek with desperate intensity. I will not let you die. I swear it on my blood and my name. I will find another way. There is no other way. There is always another way. I am the Alpha of the Northern Coven. I did not survive 3 millennia by accepting defeat. His eyes burned into hers. You were right about one thing, Elara. The laws are written by those in power, and I have power enough to rewrite the world if I must. Before she could respond, he pulled her close against the bars, his lips finding hers in a kiss that tasted of desperation and eternity. It was not the gentle exploration of their earlier encounters. This was the kiss of a man drowning, clinging to the only thing that could save him. When he finally pulled back, his voice was raw. Do not give up. Fight her tomorrow with everything you have. I will be there, and I will have found a way to save you. Lucien, promise me you will fight. The intensity in his eyes demanded an answer. Elara found herself nodding, even as logic told her the battle was already lost. I promise. Good. He released her hand, stepping back from the bars. The mask of the Alpha settled over his features once more, but she could still see the cracks in his control. I must go. But know this, Elara Thorne. You are mine. In this life and whatever comes after. No law, no council, no ancient tradition will change that truth. He disappeared into the shadows before she could respond, leaving her alone with the echoes of his promise and the knowledge that tomorrow, one way or another, everything would end. The rest of the night passed in fragments of time that felt both too fast and impossibly slow. Elara tried to rest, knowing she would need every ounce of strength for the coming combat. But sleep eluded her, chased away by images of Morgana's ancient fangs and the knowledge that no human had ever survived trial by combat against a vampire of her power. Dawn came and went without breaking the darkness of the underground cell. Elara had no way to mark the passage of hours except by the growling of her empty stomach and the gradual shift from exhaustion to a strange, crystalline clarity. If today was the day she died, she would face it with courage. She would give Lucien that much. When the guards finally came for her, the sun was already setting on the surface. They escorted her through winding corridors carved from living rock, up endless stairs that seemed to spiral toward the heavens. The arena, she knew, was built into the side of the mountain, open to the sky, but surrounded by sheer cliffs that prevented escape. The ancient vampires liked their executions to have dramatic backdrops. They emerged into the evening air, and despite everything, Elara caught her breath at the beauty of the scene. The arena of judgment was a perfect circle of white stone, gleaming like bone in the fading light. Tiers of seats rose in concentric rings, already filled with hundreds of vampires come to witness the spectacle. The sky above was a riot of orange and purple as the sun sank below the western peaks. In the center of the arena stood a raised platform surrounded by a circle of silver chains, a traditional vampire dueling ground designed to contain the combatants and prevent outside interference. Lady Morgana was already there, clad in crimson armor that seemed to have been forged from blood and shadow. She looked like a goddess of war, ageless and terrible. When she smiled at Ilara, her fangs gleamed white against red lips. "The little mouse arrives," Morgana called out, her voice carrying across the arena. "Tell me, human, have you made peace with your gods? You will be meeting them shortly." Ilara walked across the sand toward the dueling circle, her chin held high despite the terror coursing through her veins. She wore a simple white shift, the traditional garb of those facing trial by combat. It marked her as the accused, the vulnerable, the one who must prove her innocence through blood. The guards removed her shackles and ushered her into the circle. The moment she crossed the line of silver chains, she felt the magic activate, a tingling sensation that raised the hairs on her arms. She was trapped now, bound by ancient enchantments, until the combat was concluded. Until one of them was dead. The council took their seats in the place of honor overlooking the arena. Lucian was among them, his face a mask of stone. But Ilara saw the way his hands gripped the arms of his throne hard enough to crack the wood, saw the muscle jumping in his jaw as he fought for control. Their eyes met across the distance. He gave the smallest shake of his head, a wordless message. He had found no proof, no evidence to stop what was about to happen. She nodded in return, trying to convey acceptance, forgiveness, love. Lady Morgana laughed, the sound echoing through the arena like breaking glass. "How touching! The alpha mourns his pet." She turned to address the assembled crowd. "Let it be known that I take no pleasure in this execution. But the law is clear. Any who raise their hand against vampire nobility must face justice. And justice, in this case, requires blood." "Then let us proceed," Ilara said quietly. "I am ready." "Oh, but you are not." Morgana's smile widened. "You see, trial by combat requires both parties to be armed. It would not be sporting otherwise." She gestured, and a vampire attendant approached carrying a sword. The blade was magnificent, steel that gleamed like captured moonlight, perfectly balanced, etched with runes that promised death to immortal flesh. It was, Ilara realized with shock, a vampire hunter's sword, forged with silver and blessed with ancient magic, specifically designed to kill creatures of the night. "Take it," Morgana commanded. "Fight with every skill you possess. I want this to be memorable." Ilara's hands closed around the hilt. The sword was heavier than she expected, but something about the weight felt right. Her father had taught her basic swordsmanship before his fall from grace. A gentleman's skill, he had called it, something to build character and discipline. She had never imagined using those lessons to fight for her life. "The rules are simple," Morgana continued, addressing both Ilara and the crowd. "We fight until one of us yields or die. No outside interference is permitted. The circle will hold until judgment is rendered." She drew her own blade, a wickedly curved saber that looked like it had tasted blood from 100 different ages. "Any last words, little mouse?" Ilara took a breath and spoke loud enough for the entire arena to hear. "I am innocent of the crime of poisoning Lady Seraphina, and when I defeat you, Lady Morgana, the truth will be proven for all to see." The vampires in the stands erupted in laughter. The idea of a human defeating one of the oldest, most powerful vampires in existence was absurd. It was comedy. Morgana's eyes narrowed. Bold words for someone about to die. Let us see if you can back them with action. A gong sounded, echoing across the arena. The trial had begun. Morgana moved with the speed of a nightmare, crossing the distance between them in less than a heartbeat. Her blade sang through the air, aimed at Ilara's throat. Instinct and training moved Ilara's arms before conscious thought could intervene. Steel met steel with a crash that sent shockwaves through her shoulders. She barely managed to deflect the blow, stumbling backward as Morgana pressed her advantage. The next attack came from the left, then the right, then a feint high, followed by a slash low that nearly took Ilara's legs out from under her. She parried desperately, her movements awkward and defensive against the ancient vampire's fluid grace. The crowd was screaming now, bloodlust rising as they sensed the inevitable outcome. Some were placing bets on how long the human would last. 30 seconds, a minute if she was lucky. Ilara's arms burned with the effort of blocking Morgana's relentless assault. She was outmatched in every way: strength, speed, experience. Her only advantage was the silver blade in her hands, but she could not land a hit if she was too busy trying not to die. Morgana's saber slipped past her guard and opened a line of fire across her left arm. Blood bloomed crimson against white fabric. The pain was sharp and immediate, but Ilara forced herself to ignore it. She counterattacked with a clumsy thrust that Morgana swatted aside with contemptuous ease. "Is this the best you can do?" Morgana taunted. "The Alpha risks everything for a human who cannot even hold a sword properly? How disappointing!" The words were designed to humiliate, to break Ilara's spirit. But somewhere beneath the fear and pain, anger kindled. Not at Morgana's mockery, but at the whole rotten system that had created this moment. The arrogance of a world where humans were chattel and love was forbidden if it crossed the wrong boundaries. She was going to die tonight. That seemed inevitable now. But she would not die as a victim, would not give these ancient monsters the satisfaction of seeing her beg. Ilara shifted her stance, calling up half-remembered lessons from her father's training. Stopped trying to match Morgana's speed and instead focused on reading the patterns in her attacks. The vampire was fast, but she was also arrogant, certain of her victory, and arrogance led to predictable movements. When Morgana's next strike came, Ilara was ready. She sidestepped instead of blocking, letting the blade whistle past her shoulder. The move created an opening. Barely half a second, but it was enough. Ilara's sword licked out, the silver edge catching Morgana's ribs. The wound was shallow, barely more than a scratch, but silver burns vampire flesh like acid. Morgana hissed in pain and leaped backward, her free hand pressed against the cut. The crowd's roar changed quality, shock mixed with the bloodlust now. "You dare!" Morgana's voice was ice and fury. "You dare draw my blood?" "That is the point of combat," Ilara replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "Or did you expect me to simply stand still while you murdered me?" Morgana's eyes blazed with unholy light. The mask of civilization fell away, revealing the ancient predator beneath. When she moved again, it was with true killing intent. No more toying with her prey. No more theatrical gestures for the crowd. This was a creature 3,000 years old, and she was done playing. The next exchange was a blur of steel and desperation. Ilara gave ground steadily, her defenses crumbling under the onslaught. She took another cut across her thigh, a slash across her cheek that filled her mouth with the taste of blood. Her vision began to blur from blood loss and exhaustion. She was dying by inches, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Morgana's blade swept up, shattering Ilara's guard and sending her sword flying from numb fingers. The weapon skittered across the sand, coming to rest 10 feet away. Impossibly far. Ilara fell to her knees, gasping for breath. Blood soaked her white shift, turning it scarlet. She looked up at Morgana, at the ancient vampire standing over her with saber raised for the killing blow. "Any last words?" Morgana asked, her voice dripping with venom. "Perhaps a plea for mercy, a confession of guilt." Ilara looked past her, to where Lucien sat frozen in his throne. His eyes were wide with anguish, his body tensed as if every instinct screamed at him to intervene. But he could not. The laws that bound him were absolute. To interfere in sanctioned combat was to forfeit his position, his honor, everything he had built over 3 millennia. She smiled at him, tried to convey with that expression everything she had never been able to say. That loving him had been worth this ending, that she had no regrets, that he should let her go and find a way to be happy in his eternal existence. "I love you," she mouthed, knowing vampire senses would carry the words to him even without sound. Then she closed her eyes and waited for the blade to fall. It did not come. Instead, a new voice rang across the arena. "Hold!" Ilara's eyes flew open. A figure was striding across the sand, a woman with copper hair and armor of dark green leather. She moved with the confidence of someone who answered to no authority, and the vampires in the stands drew back with shocked recognition. "Katarina Ashford," someone whispered, "the Hunter Queen." Vampire hunters, the ancient enemies of the immortal courts. What was their leader doing here? Katarina stopped at the edge of the silver circle, her green eyes sweeping across the scene with calculating intelligence. "Apologies for the interruption, but I believe this trial is based on false premises." "The hunters have no authority in council matters," Lady Morgana snarled. "Your presence here is an act of war." "Is it?" Katarina's smile was sharp. "Interesting." "Because I was under the impression that the Treaty of Shadows gave hunters the right to provide testimony in matters concerning crimes against our kind, and as it happens, I have information highly relevant to this trial." Lucien was on his feet now. "Explain yourself, Hunter, quickly." Katarina reached into her coat and produced a leather journal, its pages yellowed with age. 3 weeks ago, one of my scouts intercepted a vampire courier traveling between the Eastern Territories and a known supplier of forbidden toxins. The courier was carrying this: instructions for creating a silver compound deadly to vampires, but slow-acting enough to avoid immediate detection. The buyer's signature is quite clear. She opened the journal and held it up. Even from her position on the ground, Ilara could see the elegant script, could see the seal pressed into the wax. Lady Morgana's seal. The arena exploded with voices, vampires shouting questions, council members demanding to see the evidence. Morgana's face twisted with rage as she turned on Katarina. "That is a forgery, a trick designed to undermine my authority." "Then you will not object to verification." Lucien's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. He descended from his throne, moving with lethal purpose toward the dueling circle. "The journal can be tested for authenticity. Your handwriting can be compared. Unless you have reason to refuse such examination." Morgana's eyes darted between Lucien, Katarina, and the assembled council. Ilara could see the calculation happening behind those ancient eyes, see the moment when the vampire realized the trap was closing around her. "This is absurd," Morgana said, but her voice lacked its earlier confidence. "You would take the word of a hunter over one of your own kind?" I would seek truth over political convenience, Lucian replied coldly, which is what the trial by combat was meant to determine. He turned to the council. I invoke the right of evidence review. The combat is suspended pending examination of the hunter's testimony. You cannot, Morgana began. I can and I do. I am Alpha of the Northern Coven, and these are my territories. The law is clear. His eyes blazed with gold fire. Unless you wish to challenge my authority directly, Lady Morgana, I am more than willing to settle that dispute in a circle of silver. The threat hung in the air. Challenging an Alpha to formal combat was legal, but it was also suicidal. Lucian had not maintained his position for 3,000 years by being weak. Morgana drew herself up, her face a mask of aristocratic fury. This is not over. The Eastern Coven will hear of this insult. I welcome their objections. Lucian's voice was ice. Guards, escort Lady Morgana to confinement while the evidence is examined. If she is found innocent, she will be released with full honors. If guilty, he let the implication hang. The guards moved forward hesitantly. Arresting a council member was unprecedented. But Lucian's authority was absolute in his territories. Morgana had no choice but to submit or start a war she could not win in this moment. As she was led away, promising dire consequences with every step, Lucian turned his attention to Ilara. The Silver Circle's magic dissipated at his command, and he was kneeling beside her in an instant, his cool hands impossibly gentle as they assessed her injuries. "You beautiful, foolish, impossible woman," he murmured, low enough that only she could hear. "What am I going to do with you?" "Free me?" she suggested weakly. His laugh was strained. If only it were that simple. He lifted her into his arms with ease, standing in one fluid motion. To the assembled vampires, he spoke with ringing authority. "The trial is concluded. The evidence suggests Lady Morgana orchestrated the poisoning and planted false evidence to frame the accused. Ilara Thorne is declared innocent and under my personal protection until the investigation is complete." The vampires were already dispersing, their bloodlust unsatisfied, but their love of scandal well-fed. This would be the talk of the courts for decades. An Alpha protecting a human slave? A council member exposed as a traitor? The Hunter Queen providing evidence. It was the sort of drama that made immortal existence bearable. As Lucian carried her from the arena, Ilara caught sight of Katarina Ashford standing at the edge of the sand. The Hunter Queen met her gaze and nodded once, a gesture of respect between warriors. "Thank you," Ilara called out. Katarina's smile was enigmatic. "Thank your Alpha. He is the one who sought my assistance. Turns out, vampire politics make for strange bedfellows." She turned to walk away, then paused. "One more thing, Lord Darkmoor. You owe me a favor now. I will collect when the time is right." "I expected nothing less," Lucian replied. Ilara's vision was beginning to fade, darkness creeping in from the edges. The adrenaline that had sustained her through the combat was draining away, leaving only pain and exhaustion. She felt herself slipping away, heard Lucian's voice calling her name with increasing urgency. "Stay with me, Ilara. Do you hear me? Stay with me." "Tired," she mumbled. "So tired." "I know, but you do not have my permission to die. Not after everything I went through to save you." There was something almost like humor in his tone, though it was edged with desperation. "I made a bargain with hunters for you. Do you understand how unprecedented that is? How many favors I will owe?" should have let me die. Easier. Easier for whom? Not for me. His voice dropped to a whisper as he carried her through the corridors of the council hall. Never for me. She lost consciousness somewhere between the arena and Lucian's private chambers. When awareness returned, it came in fragments. The softness of silk sheets beneath her body, the smell of medicinal herbs, the gentle pressure of bandages being wrapped around her wounds. And through it all, the constant presence of cool hands moving with practiced efficiency. Ilara's eyes fluttered open to find herself in a room of breathtaking luxury. The ceiling soared above her, painted with murals of night skies and hunting scenes. Tapestries depicting ancient vampire history covered the walls. And beside her bed sat Lucian, his sleeves rolled up, his hands stained with her blood as he tended her injuries. "You should not be doing this," she said weakly. "You are an alpha. You have servants." "I am caring for what is mine." His eyes met hers, and there was something fierce in their golden depths. "That is my right, my choice." "The council will not approve?" "The council can rot." The vehemence in his voice surprised her. "I have spent 3,000 years bending to their will, sacrificing my desires for political expediency, marrying women I did not love to cement alliances, building an empire on the bones of my own happiness." He finished wrapping her arm and sat back, his gaze never leaving her face. "No more." "Lucian." "Let me speak." He took her hand, his thumb tracing patterns on her palm. "When I saw you in that arena, bleeding and defiant, facing death for a crime you did not commit, I realized something. All the power I have accumulated, all the authority I wield, all of it is meaningless if I cannot protect the one person who matters. I am a human, a slave. Your world has no place for someone like me. Then I will change my world." The declaration was simple, absolute. "I have already begun. While you were unconscious, I met with the remaining council members. I have dissolved my engagement to Serafina, offered reparations for the insult, but made it clear the marriage will not proceed." Ilara struggled to sit up, ignoring the protests of her battered body. "You cannot. The alliance can be negotiated in other ways. Trade agreements, military cooperation. Serafina herself was not opposed to the dissolution. Apparently, she has been conducting an affair with a vampire from the Western Coven for the past century. The marriage was as unwanted by her as by me. And Morgana? Under investigation. If the evidence holds, and Katerina assures me it will, she faces execution for conspiracy and attempted murder of a council member. The Eastern Coven is in chaos. They will be too busy managing internal power struggles to threaten the Northern Territories for decades. It was almost too much to process. 24 hours ago, she had been a slave facing certain death. Now she was lying in the Alpha's bed while he spoke casually of dissolving ancient alliances and executing council members. "What happens to me?" she asked quietly. Lucian's expression softened. "That depends on what you want." "What I want?" A bitter laugh escaped her. "I am a slave. My wants have never mattered. They matter to me." He cupped her face, forcing her to meet his gaze. "Your contract expires in 3 months. I will not force you to renew it. You are free to leave, to start a new life wherever you choose. I will provide gold enough to live comfortably for the rest of your days. And if I do not want to leave?" The vulnerability that flashed across his ancient face was almost painful to witness. "Then stay. Not as a slave, but as..." He seemed to struggle for the right words. As my equal, my partner, the one who stands beside me not because law compels her, but because she chooses to. The council would never allow. The council does not dictate my personal life. Not anymore. His jaw set with determination. I am rewriting the laws, Ilara. It will take time, but I have time in abundance. Within a decade, I will have built a world where humans and vampires can form bonds without shame, where love is not constrained by arbitrary divisions of mortality, where you can stand beside me without fear. A decade? She tried to smile. I am human, Lucian. I have perhaps 50 years left if I am fortunate. A decade is a significant portion of my life. Something flickered in his eyes. Hope and hesitation warring with each other. There is another option, if you wanted it, but I would never force this upon you. The choice must be entirely yours. Understanding dawned cold and terrifying. You are speaking of turning? I am. He said it simply, without elaboration, letting the weight of the offer hang between them. Turning. The transformation from human to vampire. Immortality bought at the price of everything that made her mortal. She would gain centuries of existence, but lose the sun, the warmth of life, the natural progression from birth to death that defined humanity. I do not know, she admitted. It is too much to consider now. My head is spinning from blood loss and everything that has happened. Then do not decide now. He pressed a kiss to her forehead, tender and chaste. Heal, rest, discover what you truly want from this existence. I will wait for your answer, however long it takes. And if I choose to remain human, to take my freedom and walk away, the pain in his eyes was answer enough. But his voice remained steady. Then I will let you go. I will not cage you, Ilara. Not with contracts, not with manipulation, not with the promise of immortality. You must come to me freely, or not at all. She reached up and pulled him down into a kiss, tasting the desperation beneath his control. When they parted, she rested her forehead against his. Give me time. Let me heal and think. This is not a decision to make lightly. Take all the time you need. But his arms tightened around her, as if he could not quite bring himself to release her. I have waited 3,000 years to find you. I can wait a little longer. The weeks that followed were unlike anything Ilara had experienced in her 5 years of servitude. Lucian had her moved to a suite of rooms adjoining his private chambers, a scandal that set tongues wagging throughout the estate. But he faced down the disapproval with cold authority, making it clear that anyone who questioned his decisions could find employment elsewhere. Servants who had barely noticed her existence now treated her with wary respect. Vampires who had looked through her as if she were furniture now nodded in acknowledgement when she passed. The shift was disorienting, a reminder that power in this world came not from personal worth, but from proximity to those who held authority. As her physical wounds healed, Ilara found herself thrust into a world she had only observed from the shadows. Lucian included her in council meetings, asking her opinion on matters of governance and diplomacy. He introduced her to visiting dignitaries as his advisor, ignoring their thinly veiled contempt. He gave her access to his vast library, encouraged her to read and study, to reclaim the education that had been stolen when her father's debts destroyed their family. It was intoxicating, terrifying, overwhelming. Lady Seraphina visited one afternoon, sweeping into Ilara's sitting room with an expression of aristocratic curiosity. The vampire was even more beautiful up close, with hair like spun gold and eyes the color of spring violets. I had to meet the human who destroyed a 1,000-year-old engagement, Seraphina said without preamble. You must be quite extraordinary. I did not mean to. Relax. Seraphina settled onto a chaise with fluid grace. I am not here to challenge you. Quite the opposite. I wanted to thank you. Thank me? That engagement was a prison sentence. Lucian is handsome enough, powerful certainly, but utterly unsuitable for me. Too serious. Too brooding. I prefer someone with a sense of humor. Her smile turned wicked. Someone like Marcus of the Western Coven. You have freed us both to pursue our actual desires. I am glad I could be of service, Ilara said dryly. Oh, I like you, Seraphina laughed, the sound like chiming bells. You have spine. No wonder Lucian is besotted. She leaned forward conspiratorially. A word of advice, human to, well, future vampire, perhaps. Do not let the council intimidate you. They are ancient and powerful, but they are also high-bound and terrified of change. Lucian is offering you something precious, a chance to remake the rules of this world. Take it, shape it, make them regret every moment they underestimated you. After Seraphina left, Ilara found herself wandering the estate, her mind churning with possibilities. The gardens were particularly beautiful in the evening, when torches cast dancing shadows across the carefully manicured paths, and the scent of night-blooming jasmine filled the air. She found Lucian in his study, surrounded by mountains of paperwork and correspondence. He looked up at her entrance, his expression softening in a way that it did only for her. "You should be resting," he said. "I have been resting for weeks. I am not an invalid." She crossed to his desk, studying the documents spread across its surface. "What is all this?" "Petitions, grievances, requests for intervention in territorial disputes." He rubbed his temples, a gesture of weariness she had never seen him display before. "The dissolution of my engagement has created a power vacuum. Every minor coven lord thinks this is their opportunity to advance their position. Let me help." His eyebrows rose. "You are not obligated." "I want to." She picked up one of the petitions, scanning its contents. "You said you wanted me as your equal, your partner. Well, partners share burdens. Teach me how to navigate vampire politics. Let me be useful." Something like wonder crossed his face. "You continually surprise me." "Good," she smiled. "Immortal existence must get boring. I would hate to become predictable." They worked together until dawn, Lucian explaining the intricate web of alliances and obligations that governed vampire society, while Ilara contributed her human perspective. She saw patterns he had missed, connections that centuries of tradition had obscured. Her questions forced him to justify decisions he had made by rote, to examine assumptions he had held for millennia. It was during one of these late-night sessions that Katerina Ashford returned. The Hunter Queen arrived without warning, materializing in Lucian's study as if she had every right to be there. Ilara jumped in surprise, but Lucian merely sighed and gestured to a chair. "I should have better security if you can simply walk into my private rooms," he said dryly. "You have excellent security," Katerina grinned. "I am simply better. But I am not here to demonstrate my skills. I am here to collect my favor." Lucian's expression grew wary. Already, I had hoped for more time to prepare. The wheels of conflict turned swiftly. Katerina's humor faded. "You are aware of the human settlements along your southern border? The villages that pay tribute for protection? Of course. They are under attack. A rogue vampire calling himself Draven has been building an army. Young vampires, newly turned, unstable and vicious. He is raiding the villages, slaughtering indiscriminately, turning victims without consent or training. It is a bloodbath. Lucian stood, his face hardening. And you want me to stop him? I want you to help me stop him. Draven is too powerful for my hunters alone, and he is operating in your territories. Technically, he is your responsibility. Katarina's green eyes were serious. But more than that, he is using the chaos to recruit. He preaches a philosophy of vampire supremacy. Claims that humans are cattle and nothing more. That creatures like him should rule openly, without the constraints of councils and treaties. A supremacist, Elara said quietly. He sounds dangerous. He is suicidal, Lucian corrected. If vampires openly declared war on humanity, we would lose. Humans outnumber us thousands to one. The only reason we have survived this long is by maintaining careful balance, by living in the shadows. Try telling that to Draven. Katarina crossed her arms. He has convinced himself that vampire power makes them invincible. And every night he continues his campaign. More young vampires flock to his banner. We need to end this before it becomes a full rebellion. Lucian was silent for a long moment, calculating. Then he nodded. I will mobilize my forces. But I want your word, Katarina. When this is over, the southern villages will be under joint protection. Vampire and hunter cooperation. A pilot program for the new world I am trying to build. Katarina's eyes narrowed. You are using this crisis to advance your agenda. I am using every opportunity to advance my agenda. That is what leaders do. His smile was sharp. Do we have an agreement? We do. Katarina extended her hand, and they clasped forearms in the ancient gesture of alliance. I will gather my hunters. Meet me at the village of Thornwood in 3 nights. Come prepared for battle. After Katarina left, Elara turned to Lucian. You are going to war. I am going to end a threat to innocent humans and establish the foundation for lasting peace. There is a difference. He cupped her face, his expression serious. I need you to stay here, where it is safe. No, Elara. No. She caught his hand. You said you wanted me as your partner. Partners do not sit safely at home while the other risks their life. I am coming with you. You are still recovering from your injuries. You have no combat training beyond the basics. And Draven's forces will not hesitate to target you specifically to hurt me. Then teach me. Train me. Give me 3 days to prove I can be an asset rather than a liability. She met his gaze steadily. Or admit that you see me as something to be protected rather than someone who stands beside you. The words struck home. She could see the war playing across his face, the instinct to keep her safe, warring with his promise to treat her as an equal. Finally, he exhaled slowly and nodded. 3 days. If you can prove yourself capable, you can come, but you follow my orders without question. Agreed? Agreed. The training was brutal. Lucian pulled no punches, treating her like any other warrior he was preparing for combat. He drilled her in basic sword forms, in defensive tactics, in the art of fighting opponents stronger and faster than herself. He had his best soldiers spar with her, teaching her to read vampire movement patterns and exploit the tiny weaknesses that could mean the difference between life and death. By the end of the 2nd day, Elara was a mass of bruises and exhaustion. But she was also faster, sharper, more confident in her ability to survive. On the 3rd day, Lucian handed her a sword identical to the one she had wielded in the arena. This is yours now. Keep it close, trust in your training, and remember, you do not need to defeat every enemy. You only need to survive long enough for help to arrive. That night, they rode south with a company of Lucien's best warriors, 20 vampires, each one a veteran of centuries of conflict, each one personally loyal to their alpha. They moved through the darkness like shadows given form, covering ground at impossible speeds. The village of Thornwood came into view just before midnight. It was a ruin, houses burned, bodies lay scattered in the streets, humans drained of blood left to rot as casual warnings. The air stank of death and ash. Katerina and her hunters were already there, grimly cataloging the damage. The Hunter Queen looked up at their approach, her face set in hard lines. Draven was here 2 nights ago, took 12 villagers, mostly young women. We tracked his forces to an abandoned monastery 5 miles west. He is using it as his base. How many vampires? Lucien asked. At least 40, maybe more. All young, all fanatical. They will not surrender. Then we end this tonight. Lucien addressed his soldiers. Standard formation. Hunters take the perimeter. We breach from the north. Our goal is Draven himself. Kill him and the rebellion collapses. The monastery was a Gothic nightmare, all crumbling stone and broken stained glass. Once it had been a place of worship. Now it was a den of monsters. They attacked just before dawn, when Draven's vampires would be at their weakest. The battle was immediate and brutal. Young vampires poured from the monastery like a swarm, their eyes wild with bloodlust and fanaticism. They fought with the recklessness of those who believed themselves invincible. Ilara stayed close to Lucien, her sword cutting through the darkness. She would never be as fast or strong as the vampires around her, but she had learned to make herself a difficult target, to move unpredictably, to exploit openings when they appeared. A vampire lunged at her from the left. She sidestepped, and her silver blade found its mark, opening a burning line across his chest. He screamed and fell back, and she was already moving, following Lucien deeper into the monastery. They found Draven in what had once been the chapel. He was younger than Ilara expected, perhaps only a century old, barely more than a child by vampire standards. But there was madness in his eyes, and power crackling around him like an aura. Lucien Darkmoor. Draven's smile was all fangs. The great Alpha comes to stop me. How predictable. Your rebellion is over, Draven. Surrender and face judgment. Continue fighting and die here. Die? Draven laughed. I am eternal. I am power incarnate, and I will show this world what vampires are truly capable of when we cast off the chains of your weak treaties. He moved with blinding speed, crossing the chapel in a heartbeat. His blade met Lucien's with a crash that shook the walls. They fought with the terrible grace of apex predators, each strike capable of ending existence. Ilara circled, looking for an opening. She was not strong enough to face Draven directly, but perhaps she could create a distraction, tip the balance in Lucien's favor. Other vampires had entered the chapel now, Draven's lieutenants coming to their leader's defense. Katerina and the hunters engaged them, and suddenly the space was chaos, steel and fangs and spilled blood painting the ancient stones. Ilara found herself facing a female vampire with silver hair and eyes like chips of ice. The vampire smiled, revealing blood-stained fangs. Fresh meat! How thoughtful of the Alpha to bring me a snack! The fight was desperate. The vampire was faster, stronger, more experienced. But Ilara had learned to be patient, to wait for the right moment. When the vampire overextended on a thrust, Ilara's blade swept up and took her in the throat. The vampire crumbled to dust, and Ilara spun toward where Lucien still battled Draven. The two ancient vampires were evenly matched, but Lucian was tiring. 3,000 years of existence had made him strong, but Draven had the advantage of youth and madness. He did not care if he died, which made him unpredictable. Draven's blade slipped past Lucian's guard and opened a deep wound across his chest. Lucian staggered, and Draven pressed his advantage. "You are weak, old one, soft from centuries of compromise. This is the future, vampires who take what they want without apology." Ilara moved without thinking. She was too far away to reach them. But her hand found a broken piece of timber, and she hurled it with all her strength. The makeshift projectile struck Draven in the side, barely more than a scratch, but it was enough to break his concentration for a crucial half-second. Lucian's blade swept up and took Draven's head from his shoulders. The vampire's body crumbled to dust, and the chapel fell silent. Slowly, the survivors gathered themselves. Of the 40 vampires who had followed Draven, fewer than 10 remained. Those who survived surrendered without resistance, the death of their leader breaking whatever spell of madness had gripped them. Katerina approached Lucian as the sun began to lighten the eastern sky. "We should go. Dawn is coming, and there are injured who need shelter." Lucian nodded wearily. His wound was already healing, vampire regeneration knitting torn flesh, but the blood loss had weakened him. Ilara moved to his side, letting him lean on her despite the absurdity of a human supporting a vampire. "Thank you," he murmured. "Your distraction saved my life." "Partners," she reminded him, "we protect each other." The journey back to Thornwood was slower. They carried wounded hunters and prisoners who would face trial. The village survivors emerged from hiding as they arrived, their faces showing cautious hope. Lucian addressed them from the village square, his voice carrying to every corner. "Draven is dead. His rebellion is over. But the threat he represented, the hatred between our kinds, that continues. So I propose something new, a compact between vampire and human. We will protect these lands together, not as masters and subjects, but as allies working toward shared survival." The villagers exchanged uncertain glances. Centuries of fear and suspicion could not be erased with pretty words. But Katerina stepped forward, lending her support. "The Hunter Queen stands with Lord Darkmoor in this. We will maintain the peace together. Any who threaten these villages will answer to both our forces." It was not perfect. It was not even particularly elegant. But it was a beginning. Over the following weeks, Lucian divided his time between implementing the new compact and managing the fallout from Morgana's trial. The evidence against her was overwhelming. Katerina's journal, combined with testimony from captured co-conspirators, painted a picture of conspiracy stretching back decades. The council voted unanimously for execution. Ilara attended the execution, standing at Lucian's side as tradition demanded. She felt no satisfaction watching Morgana face the silver blade, only a weary acknowledgement that justice in vampire society was often indistinguishable from revenge. Afterward, as they walked through the gardens in companionable silence, Lucian finally asked the question he had been avoiding. "Have you decided about your future?" Ilara was quiet for a long moment, gathering her thoughts. "I have been thinking about what Seraphina said, about changing the rules of your world, and I realized something. I can do more good as a human than as a vampire." She felt him tense beside her. "You are leaving." "No." She stopped walking and turned to face him. "I am staying, but as what I am. Human, mortal, limited in lifespan, but not in impact." She took his hand. "You want to build bridges between our kinds. Who better to represent the human perspective than someone who lives it, who understands the fear and hope of mortality? You will age, grow old, die while I remain unchanged. Yes, and that will be my gift to you. A reminder that existence is precious because it is finite, that every moment matters because we do not have infinite time to waste. She smiled. I will have perhaps 50 years with you. Let us make them extraordinary. 50 years is nothing, a heartbeat to someone like me. Then make every heartbeat count. He pulled her into his arms, burying her hair in her hair. I do not know if I am strong enough to lose you when the time comes. You are the strongest person I have ever known. You will survive. And perhaps, after I am gone, you will find another human who reminds you why this work matters. And you will protect them and love them, and the cycle will continue. That is how change happens, Lucian, not through grand gestures, but through accumulated moments of connection. They stood together as night fell, two beings separated by mortality but joined by choice. It was not the fairy tale ending she had dreamed of as a girl, but it was real and honest and more beautiful for its imperfection. 3 months later, on the day her contract officially expired, Lucian held a formal ceremony in the Grand Council chamber. The remaining council members attended, along with representatives from every major coven. Even Katerina was there, watching with barely concealed amusement. Ilara Thorn, Lucian spoke with formal precision. Your terms of servitude are complete. You are free to leave or to stay as you choose. If you choose to remain, I offer you the position of human liaison to the Northern Coven. You will advise me on matters concerning mortal populations. You will represent human interests in council deliberations. And you will be granted full authority to speak in my name when dealing with human settlements. Murmurs rippled through the assembled vampires. Such a position was unprecedented, unthinkable by traditional standards. I accept, Ilara said clearly. Then step forward. She crossed to where Lucian stood, her head held high despite the disapproving stares. He produced a pendant, a silver wolf on a chain of white gold, and fastened it around her neck. By my authority as Alpha of the Northern Coven, I recognize Ilara Thorn as an equal voice in matters of governance. What she speaks, I have spoken. What she commands, I have commanded. Let any who doubt this come forward now. Silence. No one was foolish enough to challenge Lucian directly. Not after Morgana's fate. Not after he had proven himself willing to overturn millennia of tradition. That evening, they celebrated with an intimate dinner in Lucian's private chambers. Just the two of them, finally able to be together without pretense or fear. Do you regret it? Lucian asked as they sat by the fire, comfortable in the silence between them. Choosing to remain mortal? The path will be harder this way. I regret nothing. She leaned against him, fitting perfectly into the curve of his body. We have 50 years, more or less. That is more than many people get. Let us use the time well. I intend to. His arm tightened around her. Every single moment. They sat together as the fire burned low, planning the future they would build. A world where the divisions between human and vampire could blur. Where love was not constrained by mortality or law, where a slave and her master could become partners in reshaping reality. It would take time, decades, perhaps centuries, but they had begun something that could not be easily stopped. A revolution not of violence, but of gradual, persistent change. And in the end, that was enough. Years later, when Ilara's hair had turned silver and lines had appeared around her eyes, she would sit in the council chambers and argue passionately for policies that protected human rights. Vampires who had once dismissed her learned to listen. because behind her stood an alpha who would go to war for her words. She lived to see the first mixed settlements, where humans and vampires coexisted openly, to witness the first treaty that granted humans legal standing in vampire courts, to watch as the world she had dreamed of slowly, painfully, beautifully came into being. And when her time finally came, when age and mortal frailty could no longer be denied, she died in the arms of the vampire who had chosen her over his throne. Who had learned from her that power meant nothing without compassion, that eternity was empty without connection. Lucian mourned her as the ancient immortals mourned, with grief that spanned decades and a determination to honor her memory through action. He continued the work they had started, building the world she had envisioned. And sometimes, in the quiet moments, he would touch the silver wolf pendant he now wore around his own neck and remember the human who had taught him how to live. The story of Alara Thorne and Lucian Darkmoor became legend in both human and vampire circles, a testament to the power of love to transcend boundaries, a reminder that the greatest revolutions often begin with a single choice to see the humanity in another. And in the end, that was the most powerful magic of all.